My name is Emma Richardson, though most people call me Em. I'm 25 years old, and I never imagined that coming home 3 days early from a work conference would reveal that my entire life had been carefully orchestrated without my knowledge. When I walked through the front door to find my mother directing a small army of relatives as they packed my belongings into labeled boxes, I felt my world shift on its axis. Dad stood frozen in the hallway, holding a lease agreement with my forged signature, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about my independence crumbled. If you've ever discovered that your autonomy was just an elaborate illusion, this story might resonate with you. Before I dive into this revelation that changed everything, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of people learning to reclaim their lives. I'd always prided myself on being independent and successful. After graduating summa cum laude from Boston University with a degree in digital marketing, I landed a position at Pinnacle Creative, one of the most innovative advertising agencies in the area. Over the past 3 years, I'd worked my way up from junior associate to account manager, earning recognition for my creative campaigns and client relationship skills. Just 2 weeks ago, I'd been promoted to senior account manager with my own office and a team of 4 talented creatives reporting to me. Despite my professional achievements, my living situation was more complicated than it appeared from the outside. I lived in what my parents called the carriage house on their property in Wellesley, a charming converted garage apartment behind their main residence. It wasn't that I couldn't afford my own place in the city. With my new salary, I absolutely could. The arrangement had started as a temporary solution after graduation while I built up my savings and established my career. Somehow, temporary had stretched into 3 years. I paid market rate rent, insisted on handling my own utilities, and maintained complete independence in my daily life. The carriage house had its own entrance, a full kitchen, and even a small garden that I'd cultivated myself. My parents, Michael and Patricia Richardson, had always presented this as an ideal situation. Why throw money away on some cramped city apartment when you could be building your future here? Mom would say whenever the topic arose. Besides, we love having you close by, sweetheart. My younger brother Jake had been more decisive when he graduated last year. Despite our parents' attempts to convince him to stay in the family orbit, he'd moved directly to Chicago for his first job in finance. I envied his clean break, but told myself my situation was different. I was saving money, building my career, and maintaining a close relationship with my family. What could be wrong with that? Looking back, there had always been subtle signs of the control I'd failed to recognize. In college, Mom had somehow ended up with access to my course registration system, helping me choose classes that aligned with her vision of my future. When I'd expressed interest in studying abroad in Italy, the paperwork had mysteriously been submitted too late for consideration. Even my job at Pinnacle hadn't been entirely my own achievement. Dad's golf partner happened to know someone who knew someone, and while I'd earned my position through my own merit, the initial introduction had been orchestrated without my knowledge. 3 months ago, I'd started casually mentioning during our Sunday family dinners that I was considering moving closer to the city. Nothing concrete, just testing the waters and getting a feel for their reaction. The commute is starting to wear on me, I'd mentioned over Mom's famous lasagna. It's almost an hour each way during rush hour, and parking downtown is getting ridiculous. Mom's fork had paused midair. But you have such a beautiful space here, Emma. And the rent is so reasonable. I know, and I'm grateful, I'd replied carefully. I'm just thinking it might be time to be closer to the action, you know? Maybe find a place in the Back Bay or South End. Dad had chimed in with his usual practical concerns. Those neighborhoods are expensive, Em, and not necessarily safe for a young woman living alone. I've done my research, I'd assure them. There are some great buildings with good security. Plus, I'd save so much time and money on commuting. The conversation had ended there, but I noticed Mom and Dad exchanging glances that I couldn't quite interpret. I'd chalked it up to normal parental worry and continued my quiet apartment hunting, browsing listings online, and even scheduling a few showings for weekends when they weren't around. Last week, I'd flown to San Francisco for Pinnacle's annual client conference. It was a huge opportunity for me to present our new digital strategy to some of our biggest accounts. The conference was scheduled for Wednesday through Friday, but by Tuesday evening, our presentation had gone so well that the client signed an expanded contract on the spot. My boss, Sarah Chun, had been so pleased that she'd given me Wednesday through Friday off as a reward. "You've earned it," she'd said with a smile. "Take some time to celebrate. You've just landed us our biggest account of the year." I decided to surprise my family by coming home early. Maybe we could have a nice dinner together, and I could share my professional victory. I'd even been planning to tell them that I'd put in an application for a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in Boston's North End that I'd fallen in love with during a showing the previous weekend. As I turned my rental car into our familiar driveway on Tuesday evening, I immediately noticed several unfamiliar vehicles parked along the circular drive. A moving truck sat near the carriage house, its back doors open, and a ramp extended toward my front door. My heart began to race as I tried to process what I was seeing. Large cardboard boxes were stacked on the porch of the main house, each labeled in my mother's precise handwriting. Emma, kitchen. Emma, bedroom. Emma, books. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I parked and walked toward the house, my rolling suitcase bumping along behind me on the cobblestone path. Through the windows of my carriage house, I could see people moving around inside, systematically dismantling the life I'd built there. The herb garden I'd spent months nurturing had been dug up, my plants sitting in plastic containers ready for transport. Even my carefully arranged outdoor furniture had been stacked and covered. I pushed open the front door of the main house, the familiar chime announcing my arrival. The bustling activity inside came to an abrupt halt. Mom stood in the center of the foyer, clipboard in hand, directing what appeared to be a coordinated moving operation. Dad hovered nearby with my Aunt Carol and Uncle Steve, all of them holding various items from my apartment. "Emma," Mom exclaimed, her surprise quickly morphing into an overly bright smile. "Darling, you're home early. What a wonderful surprise." I stepped inside, taking in the surreal scene. My bookshelf sat partially disassembled in their living room. My framed photographs were wrapped in bubble wrap and stacked in boxes. Most disturbing of all, I could see items from my most private spaces, my bedroom dresser, my desk with its personal papers, even my jewelry box sitting open on their dining room table. "What's happening here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom bustled over with an armful of papers, her smile never wavering. "We have the most wonderful news, sweetheart. We found you the perfect apartment in Newton. Isn't that exciting?" Dad shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. Aunt Carol became suddenly fascinated with wrapping a picture frame that was already wrapped. "You what?" I managed, still frozen in the doorway. "It's a lovely studio apartment just 10 minutes from here," Mom continued, thrusting a lease agreement toward me. "We've already signed the lease and arranged for the movers. You'll be all settled in by tomorrow evening." I took the papers mechanically, staring at a lease with my name typed in as the tenant. A lease I had never seen, let alone signed. Attached were photos of a tiny studio apartment, maybe 400 square feet, with a Murphy bed and a kitchenette that looked like it belonged in a dorm room. "Tomorrow?" I repeated, my brain struggling to process what was happening. "Well, we knew you'd been thinking about moving." Dad finally spoke up, though he still wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your mother thought it would be nice to help speed up the process." "Help speed up the process," I echoed. "By packing up all my belongings without telling me? By signing a lease for an apartment I've never even seen?" "Oh, Emma, don't be so dramatic." Mom waved away my concerns. "We know how busy you are with work. This way, everything's taken care of. The studio is perfect for a single professional woman, and you'll still be close to family." The implications weren't lost on me. At 25, with a successful career and what I thought was an independent life, my mother still believed I needed to be managed and monitored. "I don't want to live in Newton," I said, my voice growing stronger. "If I move anywhere, I want to be in the city, closer to work." "The city," Mom scoffed. "Those apartments are overpriced and frankly dangerous for a young woman. This studio is in a safe, quiet neighborhood where we can keep an eye on you." "That's exactly the problem," I said, feeling anger beginning to replace my shock. "I don't need you to keep an eye on me. I'm an adult. Emma, Mom said in that patronizing tone I knew all too well. We're just trying to help. You've been talking about moving, but you haven't actually done anything concrete about it. I've been looking at places, I protested. I had applications in for several apartments. Well, now you don't need them, she replied brightly. Everything's arranged. The movers will finish tomorrow morning, and you can be settled in by evening. I walked further into the room, horror growing as I noticed the extent of their invasion. On the coffee table sat stacks of my personal items that could only have come from the most private areas of my apartment. My journal lay open, my laptop sat closed but clearly had been moved, and there was even a box containing letters from my college boyfriend that I'd kept in my bedside drawer. How did you get into my apartment? I demanded, my voice rising. I didn't give you permission to go through my things. Dad looked embarrassed, but Mom lifted her chin defiantly. We have a key, Emma. It's our property after all. I pay rent, I shot back. I have tenant rights. You can't just enter whenever you want. Don't be ridiculous, Mom dismissed. We're family, not some impersonal landlord-tenant situation. I spotted my journal among the items they'd packed and felt physically sick. That journal contained my most private thoughts, including growing frustrations with their overbearing behavior and my secret plans to move to the city. Stop, I said firmly. Stop packing. This ends right now. Emma, Mom began, her tone turning defensive. After everything we've done for you. Michael, I interrupted, turning to my father. Did you know about this? Did you approve of them going through my private things? Dad looked away. Your mother thought it would be more efficient to pack while you were away. She was trying to help. You read my journal, didn't you? I asked Mom directly, holding up the book. You went through my computer too. Her slight hesitation told me everything I needed to know. How could you? I whispered. I needed to understand what you were thinking, she justified. You've been so secretive lately, always on your laptop, barely engaging during family dinners. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That's how you knew I was looking at apartments in the city. You violated my privacy completely. I saw those overpriced listings you were considering, Mom admitted without a trace of remorse. In questionable neighborhoods, no less. I knew we had to intervene before you made a terrible mistake. The depth of the violation was staggering. My parents hadn't just packed my things. They'd systematically invaded every aspect of my private life to maintain control over my decisions. How did you even know I'd be coming home early? I asked suddenly. I never told you my exact conference schedule. Dad looked away again, but Mom lifted her chin defiantly. I called your office. That sweet receptionist was very helpful when I explained I was your emergency contact and needed to coordinate a surprise. You impersonated me? I was aghast. That's not just inappropriate, it's probably illegal. It was necessary, Mom insisted. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had time to arrange everything properly. I looked around the room at the faces of my family members, hoping to find an ally somewhere. Uncle Steve was studiously avoiding eye contact. Aunt Carol had found something fascinating to organize in a box that was already organized. Only Dad showed any sign of discomfort, but he remained silent. The patterns of my entire life suddenly came into sharp focus. College applications that had mysteriously been submitted late for schools too far from home. The study abroad program that never happened due to paperwork issues. Job opportunities that my parents had somehow steered me away from. Even my current job, which I'd thought I'd landed on my own merit, had been influenced by my father's connections. I reached for my phone to call Jake, desperately needing someone sane to talk to, only to have it go straight to voicemail. Of course. Emma, Mom said, using my full name as she always did when laying down the law. I know you're upset, but you're overreacting. This is for your own good. My own good? I repeated incredulously. How is violating my privacy and making decisions about my life without my consent for my own good? Someone needs to make responsible decisions here, she snapped, her facade of helpfulness finally cracking. You clearly aren't thinking clearly about this move. The implication that at 25, with a successful career and independent life, I somehow wasn't capable of choosing my own apartment was the final straw. Put everything back, I demanded. I'm not moving into that studio. It's too late, Mom replied coldly. The lease is signed. The deposit is paid. That's your problem, not mine, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. I never asked you to do any of this. After everything we've done for you, she began, her voice rising, this is the thanks we get? It was the beginning of a familiar script, one I'd heard throughout my life whenever I'd pushed back against their control. The guilt trip, the reminder of all I owed them, the implication that independence equaled ingratitude. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to play my assigned role. What exactly have you done that gives you the right to make my decisions? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like control, not love. Mom's eyes widened in shock. This wasn't how our arguments usually went. Typically, I'd get emotional. She'd remain calm and reasonable, and eventually I'd give in to keep the peace. Control? She repeated incredulously. We've given you everything. A beautiful place to live, support for your career. I pay market rate rent, I interrupted. I've been financially independent since graduation. And as for my career, half the opportunities one thought I'd earn myself were apparently arranged by you and Dad behind my scenes. We only want what's best for you, Dad interjected, finally speaking up. No, I said firmly. You want what you think is best for me, which isn't the same thing at all. Mom's face hardened. This apartment is happening, Emma. We've already given notice on the carriage house. The words hit me like a physical blow. You what? We gave notice, she repeated. Your cousin Jennifer needs a place to stay while she finishes her master's degree. She's moving in next month. Without asking me? I was nearly shouting now. That's my home. It's our property, Mom said coldly. And it's time you had your own place anyway. The studio is perfect. It's half the size of what I need, I protested. And Newton? I'd be further from work, not closer. You could look for something closer to home, Mom suggested, as if abandoning the career I'd built was a simple matter. This is insane, I muttered, running my hands through my hair. Completely insane. I turned to my father one more time. Dad, you can't possibly think this is okay. He looked uncomfortable but shrugged. Your mother has put a lot of thought into this, Em. The studio really is nice, and the neighborhood is safe. That's not the point. I was struggling to make them understand. The point is that this is my life, my decision to make. I walked over to one of the boxes and peered inside, then felt my heart sink further. Where's my grandmother's ring? It had been her engagement ring, passed down to me when she died 2 years ago. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Mom, I prompted, a new fear taking hold. Where is it? Well, Mom began, not quite meeting my eyes. Since you weren't wearing it much, I thought Jennifer might appreciate having it. It's been in the family for so long. You gave away my grandmother's engagement ring? I was incredulous. Without asking me? You have so many pieces of jewelry you never wear, Mom justified. We thought it made sense to keep it in the family with someone who would use it. What else? I demanded, looking around frantically. What else did you give away? Neither of them answered immediately, which told me everything. My camera's equipment? I asked, remembering the professional photography gear I'd saved up to buy in college. Dad looked away. My grandmother's china set? Mom stiffened. Jennifer is getting married soon. She needs nice things for her new home. So you just gave it away? I finished, my voice breaking. Do I actually own anything in your eyes, or is everything just yours to distribute as you see fit? Don't be dramatic, Mom snapped. They're just things. They're my things, I shouted, no longer caring about maintaining composure. Things that matter to me, that have meaning and memories attached. Aunt Carol finally spoke up. Patricia, maybe you should have asked Emma first. Stay out of this, Carol, Mom said sharply. This is between us and our daughter. I felt tears welling up, but fought them back. This is beyond control, I said quietly. This is a complete disregard for me as a person. We're your parents, Mom insisted. Everything we do is because we love you. This isn't love, I replied. This is ownership. The room fell silent. Even my mother seemed momentarily stunned by my words. Dad was the first to speak. Emma, that's not fair. Not fair. I laughed bitterly. You know what's not fair? Coming home to find my life being packed up without my permission. Having my privacy violated, my possessions given away, and my home reassigned to someone else. I moved toward the door, needing to escape before I completely broke down. Where are you going? Mom demanded. Away from here, I said simply. I can't be in this house right now. Emma Richardson, don't you dare walk out that door, Mom called after me, using my full name in that ultimatum voice that had worked so well when I was a teenager. I paused at the threshold, turned, and looked her directly in the eyes. I'm 25 years old, Mom. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. With that, I walked out, ignoring her calls behind me. I got in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Tears blurred my vision as I backed out of the driveway with no clear destination in mind. I ended up at Elm Park, a small wooded area about 20 minutes from my parents' house, where I used to come as a teenager when I needed space to think. Sitting on a bench overlooking the pond, I let the tears flow freely as the magnitude of what had happened washed over me. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls from both parents, which I ignored. After about 30 minutes, a text from Jake finally came through. What's going on? Mom called me freaking out about you having some kind of breakdown. I didn't have the emotional energy to explain everything via text, so I simply replied, Parents packed at my apartment to move me without asking. Gave away my stuff. I left. Can I call you later? His response was immediate. What? Yes, call whenever. Are you okay?
No.
Not even close. As the sun began to set over the park, I sat alone, feeling utterly betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me most. The worst part wasn't even the apartment or the invasion of privacy. It was the realization that my parents had never seen me as an autonomous adult capable of making my own decisions. In their eyes, I was still a child to be managed and controlled. The thought was devastating. As darkness settled over the park, the full weight of what had happened crashed down on me. My parents hadn't just overstepped, they had systematically dismantled my life without my consent. The carriage house wasn't just a place I lived, it was my home. I had built a life there, created a space that was entirely mine, and now it was being handed over to a cousin I saw maybe twice a year. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the missed calls from my parents, 15 from Mom, 6 from Dad. There were also several text messages ranging from angry demands to know where I was to worried questions about my safety, culminating in guilt-inducing statements about how irresponsible I was being. The most recent text from Mom read, Emma, this behavior is completely unacceptable. Your father and I are beside ourselves with worry. Come home immediately so we can discuss this like adults. The irony of her invoking adult behavior wasn't lost on me. With shaking hands, I opened my Photos app and scrolled through pictures of my space in the carriage house. The reading nook I'd created by the window, the herb garden I'd lovingly tended, the gallery wall of my own photography that I'd spent months arranging. All of it would be gone, packed away into a tiny studio apartment I never even wanted. But it was worse than that. As I sat there, more devastating realizations kept hitting me. My mother hadn't just read my journal. She'd gone through my computer, my private correspondence, my personal documents. The violation felt visceral, like someone had reached inside me and rummaged through my most intimate thoughts. And they'd given away my things. Not just any things, but items with deep sentimental value. My grandmother's engagement ring had been one of my most treasured possessions. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a connection to a woman who had been my confidant and supporter when my parents became too overwhelming. The camera equipment represented a dream I'd put aside but hadn't abandoned, the possibility of pursuing photography more seriously someday. My grandmother's china set had been intended for my own future home, a tangible link to family history that I'd planned to pass down to my own children someday. All of it given away without a second thought. A sob escaped me, startling a nearby squirrel. These weren't just possessions. They were pieces of my identity, tangible representations of who I was and what mattered to me. And my parents had distributed them like unwanted items at a garage sale. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Dad. Please come home. Your mother is very upset. We need to talk about this. Of course my mother was upset. Never mind that they had violated my privacy, given away my possessions, and tried to relocate me without my consent. The priority was still my mother's feelings. As I sat there in the gathering darkness, a new text from Jake came through. Just got off the phone with Dad. Where are you? Do you need me to fly out? This is completely insane. I texted back immediately. I'm at Elm Park. Just sitting here trying to process everything. Don't fly out yet, but thank you for offering. Stay there. I'm calling you right now. For the first time since walking out of my parents' house, I felt a small measure of relief. Jake would understand. He'd always seen through our parents' controlling behavior more clearly than I had. When my phone rang, I answered immediately. Jake's voice was warm and concerned. What the hell is happening there? I told him everything: the apartment lease, the invasion of privacy, the redistributed possessions, the given away home. Jake's responses grew increasingly outraged. They've always been controlling, he said, but this is psychotic. Did you know they tried to do something similar to me before I moved to Chicago? I sat up straighter. They did. Nothing this extreme, but Mom kept finding reasons why I shouldn't take the job. The city was too dangerous, the company wasn't stable enough, I was too young to live so far from family. When that didn't work, she started looking at apartments for me here in Boston, just in case I changed my mind. How did you handle it? I basically went radio silent for the last month before my move. Didn't tell them my exact moving date. Didn't ask for help, just handled everything myself. It was the only way to avoid exactly what you're dealing with right now. I feel so stupid, I said, tears starting again. I thought I was independent, but they've been controlling everything behind the scenes. You're not stupid, Jake said firmly. You're trusting. There's a difference. The fact that you believe your parents when they said they supported your independence doesn't make you naive. It makes you a normal person who expected normal parental behavior. We talked for another 20 minutes, with Jake helping me think through my immediate options. By the time we hung up, I had a plan. The next morning, I drove directly to my office, arriving early to catch Sarah before the workday officially began. I knocked on her open door, and she looked up with a smile. Emma, how was the flight back? I didn't expect to see you until Monday. Sarah, I need to ask you about something unusual. I began. Your job is absolutely secure, Sarah said without hesitation. As for housing, my sister just moved out of my guest room last month. You're welcome to stay there as long as you need. The offer was unexpected and incredibly generous. Sarah, I can't impose. It's not imposing if I'm offering. She cut me off. The room is sitting empty anyway. And honestly, after what you've just been through, you could probably use the support of someone who's not family right now. Are you sure? Completely. I live in Beacon Hill, about a 10-minute walk from the office. You'd actually be closer to work than you've ever been. For the first time in 18 hours, I felt a genuine sense of hope. Can I think about it? I asked, though I was already pretty sure my answer. Of course. But the offer stands whenever you're ready. After our meeting, I spent the morning at my desk, trying to focus on work while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from my parents. By noon, I'd made my decision. I called Sarah and accepted her offer, then texted Jake to let him know I had a safe place to stay. Next, I called a locksmith to have the locks changed on the carriage house, using my tenant rights to protect what remained of my possessions. Finally, I composed a careful text to both of my parents. I'm safe and have found a place to stay. I will not be moving into the studio apartment in Newton. We need to have a serious conversation about boundaries and respect, but I need some time to process what happened first. I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk. The response from Mom was immediate and explosive, a string of texts about ingratitude, irresponsibility, and how they were only trying to help. Dad's response was shorter and more measured. We love you, Em. When you're ready to talk, we're here. That evening, I met Sarah at her beautiful brownstone in Beacon Hill. The guest room was twice the size of the studio my parents had tried to force me into, with tall windows overlooking a tree-lined street and enough space for a proper desk and reading area. This is incredible, I said, looking around. Are you sure you don't need it for anything else? I'm sure, Sarah replied. My sister was here for 6 months after her divorce, and having someone around was actually really nice. Plus, now I'll have someone to split the grocery bills with. As we sat in her kitchen over takeout Thai food, Sarah asked gentle questions about my family situation. I found myself opening up about patterns I'd never really examined before, the way my parents had always steered my decisions, the subtle ways they'd undermined my confidence in my own judgment, the constant message that I needed their guidance to make good choices. You know what strikes me most about your story? Sarah said thoughtfully. It's not just that they violated your privacy or made decisions without you. It's that they seem genuinely unable to understand why you're upset. That suggests they don't see you as a separate person with your own wants and needs. Her words hit me like a revelation. That's exactly it, I said. They keep saying they're trying to help, but they never actually asked what kind of help I wanted. Have you ever considered therapy? Sarah asked gently. I went through something similar with my own parents a few years ago, not as extreme as your situation, but definitely boundary issues. Having a professional help me work through it was incredibly valuable. I nodded, already thinking that might be a good idea. Do you have any recommendations? Actually, yes. Dr. Martinez helped me a lot. She specializes in family dynamics and boundary setting. I can give you her number if you're interested. By the end of the week, I had established a routine in my new living situation and made an appointment with Dr. Martinez for the following Monday. I'd also hired a moving company to retrieve my remaining possessions from the carriage house, having arranged with the locksmith to meet them there. My parents had made several attempts to contact me throughout the week. Mom's messages alternated between angry demands, guilt-inducing lamentations, and occasional attempts at manipulation disguised as concern. Dad's were simpler, checking if I was okay and asking if there was anything I needed. I responded briefly to Dad's messages, maintaining basic communication while holding firm boundaries. Mom's messages I largely ignored, except to confirm that I was safe and had found housing. On Saturday morning, Jake surprised me by flying in from Chicago unannounced. I figured you could use some backup, he said when I met him at the airport. Plus, I wanted to see this new place of yours. Having Jake there provided emotional support I hadn't realized I needed. We spent the weekend exploring my new neighborhood, shopping for items to make Sarah's guest room feel more like home, and talking through the family dynamics we'd both experienced but never really analyzed together. Do you remember when I wanted to go to art camp the summer before senior year? I asked as we walked through Boston Common. Vaguely.
What happened with that?
Mom found reasons why it wasn't a good idea. Too expensive, too far away, not practical for my future. She convinced me to do an internship at Dad's accounting firm instead. Jake shook his head. I remember that firm. You were miserable there. Completely. But she framed it as building character and learning responsibility. I felt guilty for even wishing I was at art camp instead. That's the pattern, Jake said. She takes something you want and reframes it as impractical or selfish, then offers an alternative that happens to keep you closer to home and under their influence. How did you see it so clearly when I couldn't? Distance, he said simply. And maybe being the younger kid gave me a different perspective. I watched them do it to you first, so I was prepared when they tried it with me. On Sunday evening, my parents called together, with Dad doing most of the talking while Mom occasionally chimed in. The conversation was tense, but relatively civil. We'd like to see you, Dad said. Maybe we could have lunch somewhere neutral, just to talk. I'm not ready for that yet, I replied honestly. I'm still processing everything that happened. Emma, Mom's voice came through the phone. We're your parents. We love you. Can't we work through this as a family? Love means respecting someone's autonomy, I said carefully. What happened last week wasn't love, it was control. And before we can move forward, I need you to acknowledge that. There was a long pause. Finally, Dad spoke. You're right that we should have talked to you first. We got carried away trying to help. It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was something. I appreciate that, Dad. When I'm ready to talk more, I'll let you know. After hanging up, I felt emotionally drained but also oddly empowered. For the first time in my life, I had set a clear boundary with my parents and held to it. My first therapy session with Dr. Martinez was enlightening in ways I hadn't expected. She helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't really about me at all. It was about their own insecurities and inability to adapt to their children growing up. Your mother's identity has been wrapped up in being needed, Dr. Martinez explained. When you demonstrate independence, she experiences it as abandonment. That doesn't make her behavior acceptable, but understanding the psychology behind it might help you respond more effectively. Over the following weeks, I began to see patterns I'd never recognized before. The way my parents had always positioned themselves as the experts on my life, the subtle ways they'd undermine my confidence in my own judgment, the constant message that their way was the safe way and any alternative was dangerous or irresponsible. The goal isn't to cut them off, Dr. Martinez explained during one session. It's to create a relationship where you can love them without sacrificing your autonomy. 2 months after the day I'd found my parents packing my belongings, I finally felt ready to have a real conversation with them. I suggested meeting at a restaurant halfway between Boston and Wellesley, neutral territory, where we could talk without the emotional weight of being in their home. Dad arrived first, looking nervous but hopeful. Mom came in a few minutes later, her expression carefully controller. We exchanged awkward hugs before sitting down at a corner table. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Dad began carefully. We've missed you. I've missed you too, I said honestly. But I needed time to process what happened and figure out how to move forward. Mom sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. Emma, I hope you can understand that everything we did came from a place of love. I believe you love me, I replied. But love without respect isn't healthy love. What you did wasn't helping, it was controlling. We've been your parents for 25 years, Mom said, her voice tight. We know what's best for you. Dr. Martinez had prepared me for this response. Mom, you've been my parents for 25 years, which means you've done your job. You raised me to be capable of making my own decisions. Continuing to make those decisions for me suggests you don't trust the person you raised. Dad looked thoughtful. I never thought of it that way. The apartment in Newton, I continued, might have been a perfectly fine place. But it wasn't my choice. And giving away my grandmother's ring, my camera equipment, those weren't your decisions to make. Mom's facade began to crack. You never used those things. They were just sitting there. They were mine, I said firmly but gently. Just because I wasn't using them in the way you thought I should doesn't mean they didn't matter to me. We got most of it back, Dad interjected quickly. Jennifer understood when we explained the situation. Your ring, the china, the camera equipment, it's all waiting for you whenever you want it. This was news to me, and I felt a wave of relief. Thank you. That means a lot. We sat in silence for a moment before Mom spoke again. I don't understand why you couldn't just trust us to help you find a place. We have more experience with these things. Because it's my life to live, I said simply. Even if I make mistakes, they need to be my mistakes to make and learn from. But we could save you from making those mistakes, Mom protested. Mom, I said, leaning forward, what if your parents had made every major decision for you? What if they had chosen your apartment, your job, your husband, based on what they thought was best for you? That's different, she replied automatically, then stopped. I could see her actually considering the hypothetical. Is it? I asked gently. Dad reached across the table and took Mom's hand. Patricia, maybe Emma has a point. Remember how frustrated you were when your mother tried to plan our wedding? Mom's eyes widened slightly. That was completely different. She was being controlling and manipulative. The irony hung in the air between us. I don't want to cut you out of my life, I said. But I need our relationship to change. I need you to see me as an adult who's capable of making her own choices, even choices you might not agree with. What does that look like practically? Dad asked. It means asking before helping instead of just taking over. It means respecting my privacy. It means trusting that I can handle my own problems unless I specifically ask for assistance. Mom was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice smaller than usual. I don't know how to do that. Being your mother has been my identity for so long. It was the most honest thing she'd said all evening. You'll always be my mother, I assured her. But now you get to learn how to be the mother of an adult daughter instead of a child. It's a different role, but it can be just as meaningful. Dad nodded slowly. What do you need from us right now?
Time, I said.
And respect for the boundaries I'm setting. I'm living in Boston now, and I love it. I want to share parts of my life with you, but on my terms. Can we start with dinner once a week? Dad suggested. Nothing fancy, just staying connected. I considered it. Maybe every other week to start. And in the city sometimes, not just the suburbs. Deal, Dad said immediately. Mom looked like she wanted to object but caught herself. If that's what you need. It wasn't enthusiasm, but it was acceptance. For now, that was enough. As we prepared to leave, Mom hesitated. Emma, I want you to know that I've started seeing someone. A therapist. Your father suggested it. I looked at Dad with new respect. That's good, Mom. I've been seeing someone too. It's been really helpful. Maybe, she said carefully, sometime down the road, we could see someone together. To work on our relationship. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. 3 months later, I was settled into a routine that felt sustainable and healthy. Sarah had become not just a roommate, but a genuine friend and mentor. My work continued to flourish. I'd been given even more responsibility and was being considered for a promotion to director level. My relationship with my parents was slowly improving. Our every other week dinners had become something I actually looked forward to. Mom was making an effort to ask about my life instead of immediately offering unsolicited advice, and Dad was more engaged as an individual rather than just supporting Mom's positions. The joint therapy sessions had been challenging but productive. Dr. Martinez helped us develop new communication patterns and establish clear boundaries that respected everyone's needs. Recovery from enmeshment is a process, she explained during one of our family sessions. Patricia, you're learning to find identity and purpose beyond managing your children's lives. Emma, you're learning to trust your own judgment while still maintaining loving relationships with your parents. Mom was struggling with the transition but making genuine effort. It's terrifying, she admitted during one session. If I'm not protecting and guiding you, what's my role as your mother? Your role is to love and support me as I live my own life, I replied. To be someone I can come to when I need advice, not someone who gives advice whether I ask for it or not. The breakthrough came during our 4th joint session, when Mom finally acknowledged the full scope of what she'd done. I violated your privacy, she said, tears in her eyes. I gave away your possessions without asking. I tried to make major life decisions for you without your input. And I told myself it was love when it was really about my need to feel necessary. Thank you for saying that, I replied, reaching for her hand. That acknowledgement means everything to me. 6 months after the day I'd walked in on my parents packing my belongings, I was preparing to move again, this time entirely by my own choice. I'd found a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment in the North End, the neighborhood I'd originally wanted to live in. Sarah had helped me look at places, but the final decision had been entirely mine. Are you excited? Sarah asked as we packed dishes in her kitchen. Terrified and excited, I admitted. It's the first place that will be completely mine, chosen completely by me. That's a big deal. It is. And the crazy thing is, my parents are actually excited for me. Mom even offered to help me pick out curtains, and when I said I wanted to do it myself, she said she understood and asked if I'd send her pictures after I got settled. That's huge progress. It really is. My parents had offered to help with the move, but I'd politely declined, explaining that I needed to do this step independently. They'd accepted my decision without argument, which felt like a small miracle. Jake flew in for moving day, along with several friends from work and my new neighborhood. As we carried the last box into my new apartment, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. How does it feel? Jake asked as we stood in my empty living room. Like home, I said simply. That evening, after everyone had left and I was alone in my new space, I called my parents. How's the new apartment? Dad asked immediately. It's perfect, I said, looking around at the boxes waiting to be unpacked. Completely perfect. We're proud of you, sweetheart, Mom said, and I could hear that she meant it. We'd love to see it sometime when you're ready. I'd like that too. Maybe next weekend. We'd love that. As I hung up the phone and began unpacking my first box, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The woman who had walked into her parents' house to find her life being packed up without her consent was gone, replaced by someone who knew how to set boundaries, trust her own judgment, and maintain loving relationships without sacrificing her autonomy. The hardest part hadn't been learning to live independently. I'd been doing that in many ways for years. The hardest part had been learning to trust that I deserved independence, that my choices mattered, and that love without respect wasn't really love at all. 1 year after what I now thought of as the day everything changed, I hosted Thanksgiving in my apartment for the first time. It was a small gathering: my parents, Jake and his girlfriend, Sarah, and a few friends who couldn't make it home for the holiday. Mom arrived with her famous sweet potato casserole and a small wrapped package. What's this? I asked, surprised. A housewarming gift, she said with a slight smile. I know I'm about 6 months late, but I wanted to find something perfect. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. For your thoughts, she said simply. Your private thoughts that no one else will ever read unless you choose to share them. I hugged her tightly, understanding the significance of the gift. Thank you, Mom. It's perfect. As we sat around my dining table, eating food we'd all contributed to preparing, I marveled at how different this felt from the family dinners of my childhood. The conversation was relaxed, everyone's opinions were heard and respected, and there was no underlying tension about who was making decisions for whom. Emma, Dad said as we finished dessert, I want to say something. The table grew quiet. A year ago, I thought we were helping you by making decisions we believed were in your best interest. I realize now that we were actually preventing you from becoming the strong, independent woman you were meant to be. He paused, his voice emotional. Watching you build this life entirely on your own terms, your career, your home, your relationships, I've never been prouder of you. Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. We raised you to be capable and independent. It was time we started trusting the person we raised. Looking around my table at the people I loved most, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey from that devastating day, when I discovered my independence, was an allusion to this moment of genuine autonomy hadn't been easy. There had been tears, difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and the ongoing work of rebuilding relationships on healthier foundations. But it had been worth every difficult moment. Thank you, I said to my parents, for being willing to grow and change, for loving me enough to let me live my own life. Thank you, Mom replied, for having the courage to demand better from us, even when it was hard. As the evening wound down and everyone prepared to leave, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes and reflecting on the year behind me. I thought about the scared, confused woman who had sat in that park a year ago, feeling utterly betrayed and lost. She couldn't have imagined that the crisis she was living through would ultimately lead to the strongest, most authentic relationships of her life. Sometimes the most painful experiences are also the most transformative. Sometimes having your world dismantled is exactly what you need to build a better one in its place. And sometimes the people who love you most need to learn how to love you better. That Thanksgiving night, surrounded by the life I had chosen and built for myself, I finally understood what healthy love looked like. It wasn't about control or protection or making decisions for someone for their own good. It was about respect, trust, and supporting someone as they navigated their own path, even when that path led away from you. It was about loving someone enough to let them be free. As I turned off the lights in my apartment and headed to bed, I smiled at the thought of my journal sitting on my nightstand, a symbol of privacy respected, boundaries honored, and the right to live my own life finally, fully acknowledged. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, living exactly the life I had chosen. And that felt like the greatest gift of all. Have you ever had to fight for your independence from people who claimed they were only trying to help? How did you find the courage to set boundaries with family members who didn't want to respect them? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength and reclaiming your life. Remember, the hardest conversations often lead to the most meaningful changes.